British-made steel. It's everywhere. The coins in your pocket. The tins of baked beans in your kitchen. Your washing machines. The car in your garage. Railway lines. Do we care that it's all British-made? And if we do we care enough to use our taxes to save the industry from going under? To some, Port Talbot is famous for its acting sons. Anthony Hopkins, Michael Sheen, Richard Burton. They all come from around here. But now this Welsh town is itself taking centre stage, a reluctant actor in what feels like the final scene of Britain's industrial age. That's Port Talbot Steelworks down there. They've been making steel there for more than a century. The whole town is built around it. But as everyone must surely know by now, the future of the steelworks is looking uncertain. March the 29th, 2016 is not a date anyone here will forget.
Top news story, the steel giant Tata announces plans to sell its British businesses.
The company employs 15,000 workers. Ministers are under pressure to intervene.
Most of the jobs would go from the Port Talbot plants in South Wales.
Surprisingly few people in Port Talbot blame Tata Steel for selling up. The company, based in India, said it was losing around £1 million a day propping up its many British works: Shotton, Trostre, Llanwern, Orb, Caerphilly, Corby, Hartlepool, Rotherham, Stocksbridge, Wednesfield, Warwick.
There we go.
Thank you very much indeed. And it's not just the steelworks, it's every business, even this little cafe, that does enormous breakfasts for hungry steelworkers.
Very worried at the moment. Nobody's knowing what's going on. Just waiting. It's like being on the end of the cliff now.
Your customers here, most of them are steelworkers?
60%.
Is it? 60%, yeah. Really? Yeah.
Easy, 60%.
So you'd be busted.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
If you've got a steelworks in your town and you look at it every day and you pass it every day and it's part of your life, isn't it?
It is, yes. There is a great family value to it. To take that away, it'd be ripping the heart out of this place.
But it's not just can it survive. And in Port Talbot, they won't like this question, but should it?
In other words, close down the blast furnaces?
Absolutely.
Close down the blast furnaces. But that's the heart of this place.
Unthinkable to most locals, but this is not just a local issue, which is why we brought some outside experts in to argue the colder economic case about the future of British steel.
What about our national security?
Steel is an important... Steel is an... Well, if you
Well, who wants steel to be expensive other than the producers?
How many of you actually been inside a steelworks?
All this against the backdrop of a global steel crisis, which has seen the industry's fortunes fall over the years.
It's also about a fundamental foundation industry in the UK, which we all, every single one of us, touch daily. And do we want to give that away?
I tell you what will make it work, the pride in what they do, and they've been determined all the way through it to make it work.
Forget about the great global steel crisis for a moment. Here, it's local, it's personal. 15,000 jobs are at stake in this area. Steel goes deep here.
Steel.
For over 100 years.
It's been the heart of our lives.
It's given us jobs. Skilled jobs.
It's given us homes.
It's put food on the table.
It's who we are.
This video is how the people of the town put their case to the owners in India when they held the board meeting last month, which would decide the steelworks' future.
I'm asking.
And I'm asking.
And I'm asking.
And we're asking.
We're all asking. To secure our jobs.
Our communities.
And our futures.
And the works managers made their own appeal. They put forward a survival plan to the Tata board, a plan to make steel more efficiently, codenamed the Bridge.
Save our industry.
Save our steel.
Save our steel.
Save our steel.
Save our steel.
That plan was unanimously rejected. Tata said it was too pricey, too risky, and they wanted a quick sale. As that news broke, the business secretary, Sajid Javid, was in Australia blissfully unaware it was coming. That didn't make him many friends in Wales. 48 hours later, he was in Port Talbot trying to make amends. And behind the scenes, plans were already being laid to resurrect the management proposal.
We will do everything we can. There's a lot of tools in the box. We will do everything we can to help continue steelmaking here in Port Talbot.
These are tough times for the steel industry. Demand has crashed worldwide over the past few years, and with it, the price of steel. China gets the blame for producing too much and then offloading it on the rest of the world for less than it costs them to make it. It's called dumping.
The steel sector in the UK isn't inherently inefficient. It's because we are snowed under, drowning under a tsunami of Chinese imports. We're seeing China dumping steel at a huge rate onto the global market.
Tata, which has had £2 billion wiped off the value of its British steel business over the last 5 years, don't just blame that for their woes. They say it costs too much in this country to make the stuff for a whole variety of reasons.
We have business rates here which are perhaps 10 times as high as they are in Germany or France for the equivalent work.
All the other countries have got low energy costs and everything, and I'm sure on a same playing field, we could compete against anybody in the world.
We've been telling successive governments that the costs they're applying onto us, adding to our costs, are harming us. And it's taken 10, 15 years for government to realise that when we were saying this was going to harm us, we weren't crying wolf, and it really is now coming home to roost.
It's the business secretary's job to promote economic growth in this country. So what is the government doing about helping out with things like business rates and energy costs?
These are all the kind of areas where we've taken action over a number of months. In fact, energy action was taking place 3 years ago, and it's now starting to show an impact, to have an effect. The energy offering is already much, much more competitive than it was before.
And business rates, that's another one.
What you're highlighting are all the different areas where in one way or another we have already taken action.
If they don't stand by the steel sector now, then I think this could be the beginning of the end of steelmaking in the UK.
Up we go. Nice and slowly now. Wait for this end.
Steelworkers like Neil Woodcock will have most to lose if the worst happens. Like his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather before him, his life has been forged by the steel industry.
Steel to us as a family has not only been a source of great income, but a source of great pride and achievement.
Yeah. Go on.
It's something that I could say my family could not have been where it is today and what they are today without it.
But how many families in Britain today could expect to pass their way of life down to yet another generation?
Come on, Ed.
As it happens, Neil isn't that keen on his children going into steel like he did. But it's what happens now to him and his family that keep him up at night.
As a father, you work to provide for your family. And if Port Talbot goes, I dread to think where the money's going to come from.
Well done, Emlyn.
We're just really worried that this is the end, that this is just not going to carry on. We're really going to be struggling as a family if he does lose his job.
That's an example for everything.
Curtis Davis is 16. He wants to be an apprentice. He went for an interview at Port Talbot Works a fortnight ago.
It was scary, thinking, in 2 or 3 years, the old place could be gone. I'll have to go outside of Port Talbot if it does get closed down. It's going to be the case of leaving family, friends. I'm just going to have to go on my own back.
So you'll look for an apprenticeship elsewhere then, if it happens?
It's the only other option.
Why should that young man have to move from this area? Why?
Where is he going to go? I've got this picture in my mind of that young lad going to Nigeria to do his apprenticeship. We're going to have to get up very early in the morning to that. But you'll have weekends off.
So I think what you're saying is you can't imagine a Port Talbot without steel either?
Definitely.
None of you can?
With the clock ticking on Tata's sale deadline, Port Talbot steelworkers could have been forgiven for wondering whether their future had already been given to this man. Sanjeev Gupta, the boss of Liberty House, was telling anybody who'd listened that he was interested in buying the plant.
It's daunting for me to consider doing this, but can we do it? We can. I've never lost money in my life. My company has made profits every single year for 25 years. My job every day is to manage risk. I have to take risk. You can't do business without taking risk. But my job is to measure it, to take a measured risk, calculate it, and to manage it.
A fortnight ago, he took control of 2 mothballed Tata steel mills in Scotland and talked up his role as the saviour of steelmaking in Britain.
We hope what we start here today will be the beginning of a new era for the Scottish steel and indeed maybe for British steel as a whole. Thank you.
Even if that's true, it would be a new era which wouldn't actually include making steel from scratch, which is what Port Talbot's blast furnaces do. Liberty's business model is all about recycling steel from scrap using electric-powered arc furnaces.
In terms of a new model, the main thing is start melting scrap, start recycling scrap. Rather than making steel, we recycle steel. There is enough steel scrap available in the UK to feed all our requirements of steel.
The really big customers, like the car makers, prefer virgin steel made from iron ore in blast furnaces to recycled steel. And there's also a worry about the number of men that he would employ. Mr. Gupta says no problem, you just retrain them.
We've done, our initial studies show that the number of workers are more or less correct in terms of our plans and what we want to do.
So would he promise to protect all those 4,000 Port Talbot jobs if he were to take over the works?
Yes, absolutely.
Stephen Kinnock is the local Labour MP, and he's pretty sceptical about the whole proposal.
My understanding is that we would be reducing from about 4 million tonnes a year of production to 1 million. And it is difficult to see how you can do that without a pretty devastating number of job losses.
Mr. Kinnock knew nearly 3 weeks ago that the management buyout was being put together, and he was backing it.
I know the conversations are taking place. I think it's a very attractive idea with some great potential. But of course, the team around it need time to flesh out the details and also to get the investment that they need to back the plan.
The steel industry has been up and down since World War II. Mostly down.
The government intends to bring iron and steel under public ownership.
Nationalised by Labour in 1951.
We shall immediately repeal the Act for nationalising steel.
Reprivatised by the Conservatives in 1953. Nationalised again by Labour in 67. And then in 1988, with the Conservatives again in power.
British Steel is to be privatised after turning in impressive profits.
But the good times didn't last, and the steel industry stumbled into the 21st century. And now, nationalisation. Is it back on the agenda? Four days ago, with the pressure really mounting, the government did say it is willing to take a 25% stake in any credible rescue package. That's hundreds of millions of pounds. Isn't that just part nationalisation by the back door? No, says the business secretary. The government will be investing on a commercial basis.
If you look at some of our fastest growing industries today, aerospace, the automobile industry, they rely on other industries, and steel is an important part of that. If you look at our infrastructure plans, £300 billion of infrastructure spending planned over the next 5 years, a lot of that will rely on British steel. I believe firmly that steel has a huge future in Britain.
But steel production makes up just 1% of Britain's manufacturing output. And just 0.1% of the country's economic output. That's only a little more than the fishing industry.
If we contrast it to something like financial services, for example, that constitutes about 12.5% of the UK's economic output. In terms of its relevance to the much wider manufacturing sector, it's not as important as people realise.
When the plant is at full production, it produces a radiator every 5 seconds. Wow.
Tony Mullins is the boss of a radiator company just down the road from Port Talbot.
Port Talbot is 37 miles from us. Transport costs and logistics are very efficient, and the service is excellent.
His company, QRL Radiators, has used Port Talbot steel for a decade, and he's very happy with the service and quality of the product. He wants that to continue. Indeed, he feels strongly about it, but his company could live without it.
Port Talbot would have closed tomorrow. Let's be realistic, next month, the month after. What would happen to you? How would you manage?
We would have to source our steel overseas, transport...
No other UK manufacturer could do it?
No. And as such, we would regret it greatly.
And the effect of that on your business would be what?
Clearly, we will cope because, as you're aware, John, there's no shortage of steel in this world at this time. We have people queuing up to sell us steel.
And that strikes at the heart of keeping Port Talbot open, and indeed at the argument for keeping British steel. If Tony Mullins can easily get steel from elsewhere, can our steel industry really make the case that it's economically crucial? And does it really make sense for the government to spend vast sums propping the industry up?
What is so special about British steel? Is there anything special about British steel that says we absolutely must keep this industry alive?
No, not in that sense. You should keep it alive because it makes economic sense to do so.
All right.
Because within this industry, there's profitability.
Mark, you're not impressed with the idea of government money bailing out this steelworks?
I think the government should be putting in policy frameworks, not direct market interventions on sort of playing the stock market on a gamble of whether or not steel prices are going to go up or down or a particular business plan might work.
I'm sure in the end there will be payback for the government, but it's given the steelwork, all steelworks in Britain, the chance. We made money years ago, and we can make money now.
If there is to be a turnaround, it needs to be private sector money, and it needs to be a business proposition, not a political proposition from the government.
And if that means the company going bust or the steelworks closing,
yeah,
so be it.
So be it. Ultimately, so be it.
But that is clearly not the government's view.
It's a bit unusual for me to agree with any Conservative but anyway, you take what's on offer.
And what sort of figures do you have in mind? I mean, are you talking about millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or billions?
One of the figures I've heard quoted is 2 billion over 10 years, which is not a great deal of money for anybody that wants to invest. I'm saying not a great deal of money for people that are big business.
I was going to say some taxpayers might regard that as a great deal of money.
Yeah, you're right, you're spot on. But for a lot of people, represent a very good opportunity.
It's an opportunity, and it's not one to be missed, and it's not one to be rejected.
True, but it's just part of the solution. Somebody has to have a realistic plan for buying the steelworks, or the government share has got nowhere to go. And that plan, which the steelworkers obviously hope is realistic, re-emerged as if by magic at the same time that the government made its offer. That plan, the management buyout.
I've felt since the beginning, really, that a management buyout would be the best option because you would have a team in place that really knows the business and you would have a set of buyers behind them that is giving them the firepower to deliver on the turnaround plan.
Hang on a minute, that's the same turnaround plan, the so-called bridge that was thrown out by the Tata board back in March as too pricey and, yes, too risky. But then the bridge didn't have those government millions behind it. Or a consortium backed by one of Wales's richest men, the billionaire Sir Terry Matthews, and headed by the investment guru Roger Maggs.
I think the management buyout plan is totally viable. It will be raising money from the management, from hopefully the employees, and probably other people's money as well, other investors, sufficient to finance the bridge, the plan developed to get the company back to break even.
Roger Maggs also recently landed a job charged with driving future business diversity in Port Talbot to make it less dependent on steel. But diversifying, for now, can wait. Dragging the past into the future is more important.
The number one priority is to keep the boat afloat, I hope that there will be, once the dust is settled, efforts made to make this not just a steel-making region, but the best. Not in Britain, but in the world.
But perhaps we shouldn't get too carried away. After all, the problems of yesterday are still there today.
This is an operation that is shedding £1 million a day, ultimately. And so there would have to be a massive turnaround to really make it into a profit-making rather than a loss-making business. So there is a strong potential that it may not be around in 5 years.
In the case of the management buyout, you hear ideas about financial restructuring, but there's very little detail about operationally what is going to improve.
It may lack detail, but the unions say that the management buyout is what ultimately convinced the government to get involved.
The plan is there. The plan can turn it around. And I'm sure the more people that come to see the plan will buy into it and agree with it. The government have bought into it, which I didn't think that we'd have an open hell of doing. But showing them around and getting them involved and getting them to buy in and seeing what it is seems to have worked. And that's a credit to the workforce there.
Are you supporting a management buyout?
I want to see as many potential buyers as possible, and certainly the management team would be an attractive one. It's not all gloom and doom.
Okay, then can we sit down, please?
Growing up in the shadow of the steelworks today means facing uncertainties that might have surprised people like Richard Burton, Anthony Hopkins and Michael Sheen.
Right, OK, we're going to do When I Grow Up from Matilda. Who knows this one? OK, so we just...
Michael Sheen's father, Myrick, chairs the local Amateur Operatic Society. Its youth theatre rehearses every week. 9-year-old Niamh McQuaid, herself the daughter of a steel worker, and who knows, perhaps Port Talbot's next Oscar winner. She certainly knows how to attract attention.
Go on, you can say that bit.
She showed me the poster she'd made campaigning against closing the works. It went viral on the internet.
I am scared that if the steelworks close, this town will be worse than it is now, and we need to make sure that people have other jobs to go to.
When they hear Papa.
Other jobs to go to? Who wouldn't want that? But the next generation, relying on the same old industry, that's a different proposition.
Right, final thought, final question. Can any of you imagine a Port Talbot without steel?
No.
Definitely
not. None of you can?
No.
You asked what was special about it, and it's pride and passion. That is why I do it. I'm a fourth-generation steelworker myself. And if we let this go under, our forefathers now will never, ever forgive us. Never.
There's just 5 weeks left for any other buyers out there to get their bids in for Tata's British steel business. They'll be looking for more than pride and passion from their workforce. They'll be looking at the